In just over a week, the war in Gaza will enter a third year unless Hamas agrees to a peace plan rolled out today by President Trump and accepted by Israel's prime minister.
The multi-point plan, which calls for an immediate end to the war and return of the hostages within 3 days.
The plan also, for the first time, lays out in detail the future of a post-war Gaza. At first, it would be run by a governing board that would include former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. It would be headed by President Trump.
And the president made clear what will happen if Hamas does not accept the deal. Weijia Jiang is at the White House. Weijia?
Well, good evening. A White House official tells CBS News the Qatari prime minister and an Egyptian intelligence chief has met with Hamas negotiators and presented President Trump's 20-point proposal. If Hamas rejects this deal, Trump has given Israel the green light to carry on with and to finish the war.
As Israeli bombs continue to hit Gaza, President Trump announced the violence could soon stop.
We had a long, strong talk, Bibi and I, and he understands it's time. It's time.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says he supports the White House's 20-point peace proposal. If Hamas also agrees, the war will immediately end. All hostages will be returned within 72 hours of Israel publicly accepting the deal, and Israeli forces will begin withdrawing in stages.
The promise of a new Middle East is so clearly within our reach. This is the closest we've ever come to real peace, not fake peace, not political fool's peace.
The plan aims to shape the future of Gaza with an economic plan to rebuild it. Unlike previous proposals, Palestinians would not have to leave during Gaza's reconstruction. Hamas would not play a role in governing. There would be a temporary board of peace chaired by Trump. The joint announcement was closely watched in Israel, with some celebrating.
It looks like finally, we have a deal to end the war, the bloody war in Gaza, and bring all our people back home.
The plan also leaves open the possibility of a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood, something Netanyahu opposes.
That would be an outcome that, after October 7th, would reward terrorists, undermine security, and endanger Israel's very existence.
Another potential sticking point, the proposal calls for Hamas to disarm, something it has never agreed to do. Hamas has not yet accepted the terms.
I have a feeling that we're going to have a positive answer. But if not, as you know, Bibi, you'd have our full backing to do what you would have to do.
Weijia Jiang joins us now from the White House. Weijia, you mentioned that the Qatari prime minister is talking to Hamas. This deal relies on Qatar and other nations to put pressure on Hamas, but Israel bombed Qatar. How did the president deal with that?
So today in the Oval Office, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu met for nearly 4 hours before making that joint announcement. And during that meeting, Netanyahu called the Prime Minister of Qatar from the Oval to apologize for launching that attack, which targeted Hamas leadership. The White House says during that call, Netanyahu acknowledged Israel violated Qatari sovereignty and said it would not happen again.
Weijia, the two leaders did not take any questions at what was supposed to be a news conference. What do we make of that?
So it's very rare for President Trump not to take questions, especially when an event is listed as a press conference. But it may be because there are so many outstanding details that have yet to be filled in about how to implement this plan. The last time this happened with a world leader, it was with Vladimir Putin in Alaska, when they did not have any questions and they did not have any news to announce about progress toward a ceasefire there.
This was a day for negotiation at the White House. Negotiations require pressure and, importantly, a desire for different outcomes. Experience reminds us that even when a breakthrough is announced, momentum sometimes recedes, and the status quo presses stubbornly forward. At the White House today, President Trump leaned on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to apologize to Qatar for an Israeli airstrike that violated Qatari sovereignty as it targeted Hamas leaders engaging in negotiations there. That was a precondition to Qatar to move to the next step with other Arab nations to support a White House-drafted peace deal 20 points in all, to end the war in Gaza and gain the release of Israeli hostages, living and dead, as well as to a phased military withdrawal from Gaza, Israeli military withdrawal, and expanded humanitarian assistance inside Gaza. This deal is a framework with all the fragility that word implies in the Middle East, meaning each line subject to interpretation. Among the biggest asks, Hamas must disarm and play no role in a future of Palestinian governance, a stipulation that the Hamas leadership has yet to accept. Now, in its weakened state, Hamas may, I emphasize may, have to agree or risk incurring the wrath or indifference of historically sympathetic Arab nations. If Hamas says no, Netanyahu has vowed to carry the war in Gaza forward for as long as it takes. The other negotiation? With Congress over government funding. The White House and Congress, controlled entirely by Republicans, are on the verge of a shutdown that could limit basic federal services and result in sizable firings within the federal workforce, possibly firings much larger than those carried out thus far in the name of DOGE. What Trump wants and what levers congressional Democrats possess or merely imagine they possess was just tested face-to-face for the first time. Bipartisan congressional leaders just wrapped up a meeting with Trump at the White House. We have invited a House Republican and House Democrat to debate the various shutdown scenarios and potential ways out. Even by Trump standards, today was an eventful day at the White House. To guide us through it all, we turn to Ed O'Keefe. Ed O'Keefe, on the North Lawn of the White House, great to see you. Let's go through what happened in the Middle East. I want to play for our audience sound first from President Trump and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, both playing off what Hamas must do and what Hamas may face. Listen.
Everyone understands that the ultimate result must be the elimination of any danger posed in the region, and that danger is caused by Hamas. The tyranny of terror has to end, and this is, again, something that we're looking for. This is eternity. This is for forever.
I think we should understand that we're giving everybody a chance to have this done peacefully, something that will achieve all our war objectives without any further bloodshed. This can be done the easy way, or it can be done the hard way, but it will be done. We prefer the easy way, but it has to be done.
Ed O'Keefe, while this was happening, there were reports of intensified Israeli airstrikes inside Gaza. So where do things stand?
Well, everyone's waiting for Hamas, basically. Major, at this point, comes public statement from them, some signal that they're willing to negotiate what is a 20-point comprehensive plan to end the Gaza conflict that, among other things, calls for the end of the war immediately if the two sides agree, work towards redeveloping the economy of Gaza, allowing Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence to leave Gaza and head to other countries without harm once the hostages have been released and prisoners sent back to Gaza, and all sorts of other sticking points, frankly, that while they may agree to talk about this, could spend months, if not years, negotiating over the details of this. One of the biggest ones, for example, the idea that you're going to set up a temporary transitional governance of a technocratic, apolitical Palestinian committee to run the place until a different kind of government can be established. It wouldn't include any members of Hamas at all whatsoever. And then this board of peace that the president says he's going to co-chair with other leaders, including the former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who's remained intimately involved in these issues over the last several years, to somehow fund and oversee the policing, the establishment, the implementation of all these plans. But again, no word yet from Hamas that they've accepted this. And even if they do, as we've seen over the last several years now, talks between these two sides have a way of getting started and then ultimately going nowhere.
And it seemed very important to many observers that the president today at the White House engineered a phone call in which the Israeli prime minister apologized to the leader of Qatar over the Israeli strike there, and then the Qataris signing on to this, along with other Arab nations, indicating that they were not absolving Israel of its various grievances or the grievances they have with Israel over the conduct of the war in Gaza, what were prepared to move this forward. Did that in any way suggest that there has been a shift in alignment, or is that just what the White House is hoping has been achieved.
I think what it signals is that the president has spent an awful lot of time in recent weeks talking to the leaders of predominantly Arab or Muslim nations who have made clear to him, not only do we want this done, but there's economic incentive for everybody if we do. And to get that apology and that call made between the leader of Israel and Qatar and to try to settle that was a key priority for this White House, given how much Qatar has done to host these talks to try to move Hamas towards some kind of an agreement, and the fact, of course, that it hosts the largest military installation run by the Americans in the Middle East. They're a key ally that they have to be kept happy. So that was a key development today, certainly, and another sign of Israel's ongoing engagement with the Arab world, with its neighbors there, who are also eager to see this conflict ultimately ended.
Let's turn to senior foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tyab. Imtiaz, picking up on Ed O'Keefe's point, but also, of course, to get your first reactions. This is sort of like that old expression, the wish, the father of the thought, which is to say to paint a future that the president and the prime minister want, that they hope is big enough for all of the countries the president's named, which include everything from Pakistan to Indonesia, to create a future that is big enough that those Arab states, as the president said, will put sufficient pressure on Hamas to get Hamas to agree. That's a big ask. Your reaction to this today?
Well, look, this document itself is extraordinary, these 20 points. And as Ed so clearly articulated, some of the big questions that still revolve around them as well. But I think what I can tell you is that we have reached out to Hamas to try to get some sort of response from them. As you know, there's a 5-member leadership group in Doha, the very target of that strike by Israel just a few weeks ago in the Qatari capital. I'll mention that phone call that Mr. Netanyahu had with the Qatari leader in a moment, but the big question is will Hamas accept this? It seems like, given the pressure and the influence that Qatar has, that there is a reasonable chance that the Qatari leadership, or rather the Hamas leadership, will. They're under extraordinary pressure, not just from Qatar, but indeed from your average Palestinian who has suffered really under 2 years of terrible war. But one of the things I think that struck me the most, John, is something that you nodded to, which is the real sort of globalization of this proposal. You'll remember we once had a Biden proposal, and then we had an earlier Trump proposal. This proposal, which is the most detailed, is, again, one of the most globalized. There, as we've been hearing from President Trump himself repeatedly, Arab countries, Muslim countries, European countries, who have all wanted to see some sort of solution in Gaza. But what I'd also add is what was so interesting listening to both the president and the prime minister is that Prime Minister Netanyahu, in his statement, was really talking to the Israeli people to try to get the Israeli people to accept this deal, but not just the Israeli people, his extreme far-right coalition, a coalition which is bitterly opposed to ending the war in Gaza, which is bitterly opposed to withdrawing Israeli forces from Gaza. We also know that they're incredibly angry about that phone call that Mr. Netanyahu had with the Qatari leadership in Israel. Qatar is seen as a rogue state, a state that finances Hamas, that is seen, of course, as this terrorist organization. And so Mr. Netanyahu, as he leaves Washington and goes to Israel, will be facing a maelstrom of criticism from within and indeed from those on the streets who have been on the streets for 2 years nearly now, demanding this war end and that the hostages be released. John.
Imtiaz Tyab, thank you so much. I think as a final concluding point, we've between Imtiaz and Ed O'Keefe and Weijia, we can really embrace the old cliche that the devil will be in the details of this sweeping announcement made today by the president and the prime minister of Israel about a 20-point plan for securing peace in Gaza. We will report on all of those details from now until many months to come.